Fake authority always sounds loudest before someone asks it to prove its name. At 8:14 on a Friday morning, Ryan Mitchell was standing in the kitchen of his Oak Hollow Estates home, pouring coffee into a travel mug, when the doorbell camera chimed and showed three strangers at the edge of his driveway. They were dressed in dark, security-style clothing, standing near his black pickup truck as if they had already decided it belonged to them. One man held a clipboard, another held a phone pointed toward the house, and the third kept looking between the truck and the front door. The pickup sat exactly where it always sat, 8 feet back from the sidewalk, clean, registered, insured, and parked on Ryan's own concrete driveway. It was not blocking traffic. It was not abandoned. It did not have commercial lettering on the doors. It was just a working truck owned by a homeowner who used it for small contracting jobs and weekend projects. But the man at the porch camera spoke like the matter had already been settled. He said they were present on behalf of the Oak Hollow Estates Homeowners Association to take possession of the vehicle for repeated community appearance violations. Ryan felt his stomach tighten. For 2 weeks, Marilyn Price, the Homeowners Association president, had been sending notices about the truck, claiming it harmed curb appeal and neighborhood character, even though she had never cited a rule that actually banned a personal pickup from a private driveway. Ryan took one step toward the front hallway, ready to open the door and ask what was going on, but Laura Mitchell stopped him before his hand reached the lock. "Do not open that door," she said. Her voice was calm enough to make him stop faster than shouting would have. Laura stood at the kitchen counter with the live camera feed enlarged on her phone. She was not staring at the strangers with fear. She was studying them. Years in a federal investigative training environment had taught her that real authority usually arrives with clear identification, verifiable paperwork, and calm procedure. People pretending to have authority often arrive with urgency, vague language, and pressure. Laura noticed what Ryan had missed in the first rush of surprise. No marked tow truck, no visible company logo, no management company representative, no case number, no court order, and no clear legal document being shown to the camera. She switched on the porch speaker and asked the man to state his full name, company name, license number, legal authority, and the person who authorized removal from private property. The man lifted the clipboard halfway, not close enough for the camera to read, and said the paperwork would be available after the vehicle was secured. Laura typed the sentence into her notes with the time beside it. Ryan stood behind her, holding his breath, while the camera kept recording. Laura looked at him once and said, "Real authority identifies itself before it demands property." Then she picked up Ryan's phone, opened the save number for the management company, and placed the call on speaker. Outside, the strangers kept talking. Inside, Laura made sure every word became evidence. 2 weeks before those strangers stood in Ryan Mitchell's driveway, the black pickup truck had been nothing more than part of the ordinary rhythm of his life in Oak Hollow Estates. It sat on the right side of his concrete driveway, about 8 feet back from the sidewalk, washed every Sunday afternoon, registration current, insurance active, toolboxes locked, and the truck bed kept clean enough that even the most particular neighbor could not honestly call it neglected. Ryan used it for small contracting work, hauling lumber from the home improvement store, helping neighbors move heavy boxes, and picking up supplies for weekend repairs around the house. It was not a showpiece, but it was not an eyesore either. It was a practical vehicle owned by a practical man who paid his dues, kept his yard trimmed, and never parked in anyone else's space. When Ryan and Laura bought the house, Ryan had read the community covenants and restrictions carefully because he knew homeowners associations could be strict. The rules mentioned abandoned vehicles, inoperable vehicles, commercial signage, trailers in common areas, and overnight street parking in certain zones. They did not say that a registered personal pickup truck could not sit in a private driveway. For nearly 3 years, no one had treated the truck as a problem. Then Marilyn Price became president of the Oak Hollow Estates Homeowners Association, and the neighborhood began to feel different. Marilyn had a polished way of turning her own preferences into public language. She talked about visual harmony, community character, neighborhood prestige, and curb appeal as if those phrases gave her authority over anything she disliked. The first time Ryan realized his truck had become one of her targets was at a Saturday morning coffee event in the clubhouse. Marilyn stood near the refreshment table, smiling at residents while explaining that certain vehicles created the wrong impression near the main loop. She did not point at Ryan. but her eyes moved toward him long enough for the message to land. Ryan did not argue in public. He went home, pulled up the recorded rules, took clear photos of the truck from the sidewalk, saved a copy of the city parking guidelines, and placed his registration and insurance documents into a folder. 3 days later, the first written notice arrived by email. It said his pickup was inconsistent with the appearance standards of Oak Hollow Estates and needed to be removed from visible driveway parking. Ryan read the message twice, then forwarded it to Laura. She replied while she was at work, and her advice was simple. Ask for the exact rule, stay polite, and keep everything in writing. Ryan did exactly that. He responded to Marilyn and copied the management company, asking for the specific covenant section that prohibited a clean, registered personal pickup truck from being parked in a private driveway. He attached photos showing that the truck did not block the sidewalk, did not sit on the street, did not display business lettering, and did not appear abandoned. The management company answered the next morning with careful language, saying any enforcement action would require a specific rule citation and proper review. Marilyn did not accept that quietly. Her next message said the board had broad discretion to protect the character of the neighborhood. Ryan printed it, added it to the folder, and looked out at the truck sitting peacefully in the driveway. That was when he understood the dispute was no longer about parking. It was about whether one person could make a rule appear simply by saying it with enough confidence. Laura Mitchell did not treat Marilyn Price's message like an ordinary neighborhood complaint because the wording told her more than the complaint itself. That evening, after dinner, she sat at the kitchen table with Ryan's printed folder open in front of her, the laptop to her right, and the live driveway camera visible on a small wall screen near the hallway. Ryan stood by the sink, looking through the window at the black pickup truck parked under the porch light, still trying to understand how something so normal had become the center of an argument. Laura read Marilyn's email slowly, not because the words were difficult, but because she had learned that people who lacked real authority often hid the missing part under impressive language. The message used phrases like corrective action, community protection, visual compliance, and authorized enforcement, but it did not include a specific covenant section, did not mention a board vote, did not name an approved vendor, did not attach a management company authorization, and did not explain how a registered personal vehicle on private property could be removed under recorded rules. Laura took a pen and underlined every phrase that sounded official without proving anything. Ryan watched her mark the page and asked if she thought Marilyn was bluffing. Laura said she did not care whether Marilyn believed her own language or not. The question was whether the authority existed outside Marilyn's confidence. She opened the recorded covenants, conditions, and restrictions, then compared them to the city parking guidelines Ryan had saved. The city rules did not prohibit the truck. The community rules did not prohibit the truck. The management company had already said enforcement required a specific rule citation and review. That left Marilyn with pressure, not procedure. Laura told Ryan to send one more written response, short and polite, asking for the exact section number, the date of any board decision, the name of any approved enforcement vendor, and written confirmation from the management company before any further action was discussed. Ryan typed it while Laura watched, making sure there was no anger in the wording. She did not want Marilyn to receive a motion she could quote out of context. She wanted a clean record. The next afternoon, Marilyn replied without answering any of the questions. She wrote that homeowners who benefited from Oak Hollow Estates had a responsibility to respect the overall character of the community, and that continued refusal to cooperate could require escalation. Ryan felt his face grow warm when he read it, but Laura only leaned back and tapped the page once. Escalation to what? She said. That is the part she refuses to define. At the next homeowners association meeting, Marilyn spoke from the front of the clubhouse about residents who exploited technical language to avoid basic standards. She never said Ryan's name, but several people looked his way. Ryan wanted to stand up and defend himself, yet Laura lightly touched his wrist under the table and kept him seated. Public frustration was exactly the room Marilyn wanted. Documentation was the room she could not control. When they got home, Laura told Ryan that from that moment forward, every message would be saved, every phone call would be avoided unless recorded by notes afterward, and every camera around the front of the house would stay active. Ryan thought she was being extremely careful. Laura knew she was being exactly careful enough. By Wednesday morning, Ryan Mitchell's folder had become a complete record of a dispute that Marilyn Price still wanted to treat like a matter of taste. The first section held photographs of the black pickup truck from the sidewalk, the curb, the front porch, and the garage, each one showing the same thing from a different angle. The truck was parked on private concrete, clean, current, and several feet clear of the sidewalk. The second section held the vehicle registration, proof of insurance, and city parking guidelines. The third section held the Oak Hollow Estates covenants, conditions, and restrictions, with the vehicle rules highlighted in yellow. The last section held Marilyn's notices and Ryan's written responses, all polite, all specific, all asking the same question she kept avoiding. What rule gives the association the right to remove this truck from this driveway? Ryan did not enjoy living like a man preparing for a hearing, but Laura had taught him that good records were not paranoia when someone else was trying to replace facts with pressure. Late that morning, the management company finally sent a longer response. Their message was careful but important. They wrote that their office had not confirmed a covenant violation regarding Ryan's pickup truck, had not approved vehicle removal, had not contacted any towing or recovery vendor, and would require a documented rule citation before any further enforcement could proceed. Ryan read the message twice, then printed it and placed it on top of the folder. For the first time in days, he felt the tension in his shoulders loosen. The association's own management company had drawn a line Marilyn could not easily cross. Laura read the email after work and nodded, but she did not look relieved in the same way Ryan did. She said the message was useful because it closed the official path, but people who felt embarrassed by procedure sometimes looked for another path. Ryan wanted to believe that was unlikely. Oak Hollow Estates was a quiet neighborhood with trimmed lawns, matching mailboxes, and residents who complained about sprinkler schedules more than anything serious. But that evening, Marilyn sent one more message, and the tone was different. She did not copy the management company. She wrote directly to Ryan and said the association had been patient long enough. She said visible noncompliance created a harmful precedent, and that homeowners who refused to cooperate could not be surprised when corrective measures became necessary. Ryan forwarded it to Laura without replying. Laura saved it, then told him not to answer unless Marilyn copied the management company again. The next day passed without another notice. The truck sat in the driveway. Neighbors walked dogs. A delivery. Driver dropped a package by the porch. Everything looked ordinary until Thursday night at 9:46, when a new email appeared from an address Ryan did not recognize. The subject line said Final Vehicle Compliance Action. The message claimed that a vehicle recovery team would arrive the next morning if the pickup was not removed from visible driveway parking before 8 o'clock. There was no case number, no court order, no management company signature, no licensed vendor information, and no valid contact person. Laura read it at the kitchen table, then became very still. She took screenshots, saved the email header, printed the message, and forwarded it to the management company with one sentence asking whether they had authorized any vehicle recovery action at the Mitchell property. Then she checked the porch camera, driveway camera, and side camera, confirming that each one was recording with sound. Ryan looked through the window at the black pickup sitting under the porch light and asked if she truly believed someone would come over a truck. Laura placed the strange email into the folder and said that when fake authority cannot win on paper, it often tries to arrive before real authority wakes up. Ryan Mitchell was awake before sunrise on Friday, though he could not honestly say he had slept much. The strange email from the night before sat printed on the kitchen table beside the folder, looking less official in daylight, but somehow more disturbing because of how confidently it had announced something it had no proof to support. Laura had already checked the cameras twice. The porch camera showed the front entry and the edge of the driveway. The driveway camera showed the full black pickup truck, clean and still, parked on private concrete exactly where it had been the night before. The side camera showed the walkway, garage door, and part of the street. Laura placed her phone, Ryan's phone, the printed management company email, the city parking guidelines, and the covenants, conditions, and restrictions within reach on the counter. Ryan tried to drink coffee, but every sound outside made him glance toward the window. At 8:07, the first motion alert appeared. A dark gray sport utility vehicle rolled slowly past the house, reached the end of the cul-de-sac, turned around, and stopped across from the Mitchell driveway. Ryan felt the room shrink around him. Laura did not move quickly. She opened all 3 camera feeds and set them side by side. 3 men stepped out of the vehicle. They wore dark clothing that looked official from far away, but had no clear company logo, no readable name patch, and no marked vehicle connected to any licensed towing company. One carried a clipboard. One held a phone, already recording. The third stood near the curb and looked at the pickup as if he expected someone else to give the next instruction. Ryan took 2 steps toward the front hall before Laura said his name. Not sharp, not afraid, just steady. Stay inside. We verify first. The doorbell rang at 8:14. The man at the porch camera said they were present for vehicle compliance recovery authorized by the Oak Hollow Estates Homeowners Association. Laura turned on the speaker and asked him to provide his full name, company name, license number, legal authority, written authorization, and the name of the person at the management company who approved the action. The man said the documents would be shown after the vehicle was secured. Laura typed the sentence into her notes exactly as he said it. Ryan stood behind her with the folder in his hands, fighting the urge to explain through the door that the truck was registered, insured, and not violating any rule. Laura knew explanation was not the first step. Verification was. She asked whether they had a court order, a written towing authorization from the management company, or a board-approved vendor request. The answer came back wrapped in official-sounding phrases: final compliance action, community standards, refusal to cooperate, visible violation. None of it answered the question. Laura picked up Ryan's phone and called the management company using the number saved from previous correspondence, not any number from the strangers outside. She placed the call on speaker so the camera near the entry would capture her side of the conversation. When the receptionist answered, Laura gave her name, address, account number, and explained that unknown individuals were at the driveway claiming authority to remove a registered personal vehicle from private property. The receptionist placed her on a brief hold. Outside, the 3 men shifted in place. The one with the clipboard looked back toward the sport utility vehicle. The one recording lowered his phone slightly. When the receptionist returned, her voice came through clearly. No vehicle removal had been approved. No vendor had been dispatched. No recovery team had been authorized by the management company. Laura calmly repeated each point back, asked for written confirmation by email, and thanked her. Ryan looked at the camera feed again. The truck had not moved, but the confidence outside had. Laura did not celebrate the management company's answer because verification was only useful if the next step was just as careful. The strangers were still outside. The black pickup was still in the driveway, and the man at the porch camera was still speaking in the same confident tone, even though the foundation under his claim had just disappeared. Ryan looked at Laura as if waiting for permission to finally say something, but she shook her head once. Not yet, she said. We do not argue with people who cannot prove authority. We document them. She opened the porch speaker again and repeated calmly that the management company had confirmed no vehicle removal had been approved, no vendor had been dispatched, and no recovery team had been authorized. The man with the clipboard said the Homeowners Association president had the authority to proceed when residents refused compliance. Laura typed that sentence into her notes with the time beside it. Then she said, "Please remain off the vehicle and wait for officers to verify your paperwork." The word officers changed the air outside. The man holding the phone lowered it another inch. The man near the curb stepped back toward the dark gray sport utility vehicle. Ryan saw it on the driveway camera and felt a strange mix of relief and anger, but Laura kept her voice level as she called emergency services. She gave their full address, described the individuals at the driveway, explained that they were claiming Homeowners Association authority to take a registered personal vehicle from private property, and stated that the management company had just denied authorizing any removal. She did not exaggerate, did not guess, and did not use dramatic language. She said the doors were locked, the homeowners were inside, the cameras were recording, and the individuals had been asked not to approach the truck. The dispatcher told them to stay inside and wait for officers. Laura thanked her and kept the call record with the timeline. Outside, the clipboard man pressed the doorbell again and said they did not want to involve law enforcement over a community matter. Laura answered through the speaker, "Then your paperwork will resolve it quickly." Ryan almost smiled because he heard what she was really saying. Real authority would welcome verification. Fake authority feared it. Then Laura picked up Ryan's phone and called Marilyn Price using the number listed in the Homeowners Association directory. Marilyn answered after several rings, her voice sharp with impatience. "Ryan, this has gone far enough," she said before anyone could introduce themselves. Laura placed the call on speaker, set the phone near the porch camera monitor, and identified herself. "Marilyn, this is Laura Mitchell. There are 3 individuals at our driveway claiming they were sent to remove our truck. Did you authorize anyone to come to our property this morning?" Marilyn paused, then said the association had given Ryan every reasonable chance to correct a visible violation. Laura asked again, "Did you send or approve the people currently standing at our driveway?" Marilyn replied that management had been too slow, and she had made sure the matter was handled before one homeowner damaged the standards everyone else paid to maintain. Ryan closed his eyes. Laura wrote the words down exactly. Then she said, "Thank you for confirming your involvement." Marilyn's tone changed immediately. She asked whether the call was on speaker. Laura said Ryan was present. The security system was recording the front entry, and officers were already on the way to verify the authority of everyone involved. Marilyn accused Laura of escalating a simple neighborhood issue. Laura answered that a simple neighborhood issue does not require unidentified people to appear at a private driveway before business hours. Then she ended the call before Marilyn could turn the conversation into another speech. Outside, the strangers had stopped knocking. The truck remained untouched, clean, legal, and still. For the first time that morning, Ryan understood that Laura had not been trying to win an argument at the door. She had been building a record strong enough that nobody could move the story later. The first police vehicle turned onto the cul-de-sac at 8:31, moving slowly enough to keep the street calm, but clearly enough to change the way everyone outside was standing. A second vehicle stopped behind it less than a minute later. Ryan Mitchell watched from the kitchen camera monitor as 2 uniformed officers stepped out and approached the strangers near the driveway. Nobody rushed. Nobody shouted. That was the first thing Ryan noticed. Real authority did not need to perform for the porch camera. It asked questions, checked documents, and controlled the space by being clear. Laura stood beside him with the folder open on the counter, the pages already arranged in the order the morning had unfolded. The strange email, the management company denial, her notes from the porch conversation, the call to Marilyn Price, and the registration papers for the black pickup truck. Ryan wanted to go outside immediately, but Laura touched his sleeve and said, "Wait until they ask for us. We give them a clean handoff, not another argument." Outside, the clipboard man tried to explain that the visit was a homeowners association compliance matter. One officer asked for identification, company information, written authorization, and the legal basis for attempting to remove a registered vehicle from a private driveway. The man handed over several pages, but even from the camera feed Ryan could tell the officer was not impressed. The documents had official-sounding phrases, but they did not show a court order, did not show management company authorization, did not show a licensed vendor request approved through Oak Hollow Estates, and did not show any rule that actually allowed the removal of Ryan's pickup. The officer then spoke separately to the man who had been recording and the man who had been standing near the curb. Their answers did not line up neatly. One said they were hired for compliance documentation. Another said they were told the association had authority. The third said the homeowner had already been given final notice. Laura wrote each visible shift into the timeline because even silence could matter when people realized their paperwork did not match their confidence. A few neighbors had opened blinds by then, and one man across the street stepped onto his porch with a coffee mug, then stopped when he saw the officers. The doorbell rang again, this time from an officer who clearly identified herself and asked to speak with the homeowners. Laura confirmed through the camera before opening the main door, keeping the storm door closed while she introduced herself and Ryan. She handed over the printed timeline first, then the management company email confirming that no vehicle removal had been approved. Ryan provided the vehicle registration, proof of insurance, driveway photographs, city parking guidelines, and the highlighted covenant section. The officer reviewed the pages, asked whether the camera had captured the strangers claiming authority, and Laura said yes, with audio. She also explained that Marilyn had confirmed on speakerphone that she made sure the matter was handled after management failed to act quickly enough. The officer wrote that down and gave Ryan a look that told him the sentence mattered. Outside, the strangers no longer looked like a team with a plan. They looked like three people waiting to learn how serious a bad assumption could become. The officer told them they had no verified authority to remove the truck, instructed them to leave the property, and advised them that any further contact needed to go through proper legal and association channels. The dark gray sport utility vehicle pulled away a few minutes later. The officers gave Ryan and Laura an incident number and told them to preserve the footage and documents. When the street finally quieted, Ryan looked at the black pickup still sitting in the driveway, untouched and ordinary under the morning light. Laura closed the folder and placed the incident number on top. The truck had never moved, but the story had shifted completely. Marilyn had sent pressure to the front door, and Laura had answered it with proof. By noon, the quiet street in Oak Hollow Estates had become the kind of neighborhood where curtains moved carefully and people checked their doorbell cameras twice before pretending they had not seen anything. Ryan Mitchell did not blame them. A dark gray sport utility vehicle had arrived at his driveway that morning with three strangers claiming authority to remove his truck, and less than 30 minutes later real officers had left behind an incident number and a very different version of events. The black pickup still sat where it had always sat, 8 feet back from the sidewalk, clean, registered, insured, and suddenly more famous than any vehicle in the neighborhood had ever wanted to be. Ryan wanted the whole thing to be over, but Laura knew the most important part of a false authority problem often began after the front door went quiet. She downloaded the camera clips, saved the audio files, scanned the officer incident number, and placed every printed page into the folder in order. First came Marilyn Price's original notice about appearance standards. Then Ryan's written request for the exact rule. Then the management company message saying any enforcement required a specific covenant citation. Then Marilyn's pressure email. Then the strange final vehicle compliance action email from the night before. Then the management company confirmation that no removal had been approved. Then Laura's notes from the porch conversation and the speakerphone call where Marilyn admitted she had made sure the matter was handled. At 12:38, the management company sent a formal email repeating what they had already said that morning. No vehicle removal had been authorized through their office. No vendor had been dispatched. No board vote had been recorded regarding Ryan's truck. No confirmed violation existed under the recorded vehicle rules. Laura printed that email twice. Ryan asked why she needed 2 copies, and she said one was for their records and one was for the room that would eventually pretend it had not understood the first copy. She was right. At 2:17, an email arrived from Thomas Reed, the Oak Hollow Board secretary, requesting that Ryan and Laura attend an emergency board review at the clubhouse that evening. The wording was polite, but the urgency was obvious. The board could no longer treat the dispute like a homeowner refusing to cooperate. Someone had bypassed management, invoked the homeowners association name, and sent unknown people to private property with paperwork that did not hold up when real authority arrived. That evening, the clubhouse was fuller than Ryan expected. Residents sat in rows usually left empty, whispering until Thomas called the meeting to order. Marilyn sat near the front in a navy blazer, composed but pale around the eyes, with a folder placed neatly before her. Ryan and Laura sat together with their own folder between them. Thomas said the purpose of the meeting was to determine whether any association officer had authorized action outside approved procedure. Marilyn immediately tried to redirect the discussion toward curb appeal, neighborhood character, and repeated homeowner noncompliance. Laura waited until Thomas asked for the Mitchell timeline. Then she stood, not dramatically, not angrily, and began with the rules. She explained that the recorded vehicles section addressed abandoned vehicles, inoperable vehicles, certain street parking issues, trailers in common areas, and commercial signage, but did not prohibit a registered personal pickup truck in a private driveway. Ryan passed around the photographs showing the truck parked properly on their own concrete. Laura then placed the management company email beside Marilyn's notices and read the line confirming that no violation had been established. When she reached the strange recovery email, the room grew still. When she played the porch camera audio of the man saying they were there under Homeowners Association authority, several residents looked directly at Marilyn. Laura saved the final piece for last. The speakerphone call where Marilyn said management had been too slow and she had made sure the matter was handled. By the time Laura read the police incident number into the record, the issue was no longer whether Ryan's truck belonged in his driveway. The issue was whether Marilyn had tried to make fake authority sound official enough to get there first. For several seconds after Laura Mitchell finished the timeline, nobody in the Oak Hollow clubhouse moved to defend Marilyn Price. That silence said more than anger would have. Residents who had once treated Marilyn's notices like final decisions were now looking at the documents spread across the board table, seeing the difference between a written rule and a confident demand. Marilyn adjusted the folder in front of her and said the recording lacked context. She claimed she had been trying to protect neighborhood standards, not create a crisis, and that Ryan Mitchell had forced the association into a difficult position by refusing reasonable cooperation. Ryan sat forward, but Laura placed one hand lightly on the folder between them, reminding him that the documents were already doing the work. Thomas Reed, the board secretary, asked Marilyn a simple question: which recorded covenant authorized removal of a registered personal pickup truck from a private driveway? Marilyn began talking about appearance standards and community expectations. Thomas waited until she finished, then repeated the question. Marilyn did not give a section number. Denise Carver, another board member, turned to the management company representative and asked whether management had approved any vendor, recovery team, or vehicle removal request for the Mitchell property. The representative answered clearly that they had not. She added that management had specifically told Marilyn that no confirmed violation existed without a rule citation and review. A quiet murmur spread through the room. Marilyn said management had been moving too slowly and that leadership sometimes required initiative. That was when Denise asked the question that changed the meeting from uncomfortable to final. Did the board vote to authorize outside individuals to go to the Mitchell home? Marilyn looked down at her papers. She said the board had discussed the truck as an ongoing issue. Denise said discussion was not a vote. Thomas asked whether Marilyn had signed any contract, sent any written authorization, or used the association name to contact the people who arrived at Ryan and Laura's driveway. Marilyn said she had reached out for guidance about compliance support. Laura opened the folder and placed the strange recovery email beside Marilyn's last message to Ryan, showing how closely the phrases matched: visible noncompliance, final action, corrective measures, refusal to cooperate. She did not accuse Marilyn of writing the message. She simply let the wording sit where everyone could see it. Ryan then spoke, calmly and briefly. He said he had never refused a real rule. He had asked for one from the beginning. He had provided registration, insurance, photographs, city parking guidance, and the covenants. What he refused was the idea that his property could be taken because one officer of the association disliked how it looked. The room changed after that. A man in the second row said Marilyn had used the same broad language about his work van. A woman near the aisle said she had paid a fine once because she was afraid the next notice would get worse. Thomas raised his hand to keep the meeting orderly, but the board had heard enough. Denise made a motion to suspend Marilyn from all enforcement communications, vendor contact, violation notices, and homeowner compliance actions pending formal review. Another board member seconded it immediately. Marilyn objected, saying the board was humiliating itself in front of residents. Thomas answered that the humiliation began when a homeowner had to call real officers because someone tried to make association pressure look like legal authority. The vote passed with only Marilyn opposed. She remained seated, but her control of the room was gone. Laura placed the police incident number back into the folder. Ryan gathered the photographs of the truck. As they walked toward the exit, Marilyn leaned close enough to speak quietly and said, they had turned a simple curb appeal problem into a public attack. Laura looked at her without raising her voice and said, no, Marilyn, you turned a preference into a paper trail, and the paper trail answered back. The days after the emergency meeting were quieter than Ryan Mitchell expected, but not because the neighborhood had forgotten what happened. Oak Hollow Estates had the kind of silence that came after people realized a familiar voice had been louder than it was lawful. The black pickup truck remained in the driveway, 8 feet back from the sidewalk, washed on Sunday, registration current, insurance active, toolboxes locked, and sunlight reflecting off the windshield like nothing dramatic had ever happened around it. Ryan stood beside it on Monday morning with a microfiber towel in his hand, not because the truck needed cleaning, but because he needed to feel how ordinary it still was. It was not a symbol of rebellion. It was not an attack on community standards. It was a truck parked on private concrete, exactly where the rules allowed it to be. Neighbors began approaching carefully over the next few days. One man from the next street admitted that Marilyn Price had once threatened him over a work van he used to help his father with medical appointments. A young mother said she had paid a landscaping fine without questioning it because Marilyn's notices always sounded like the decision had already been made. Ryan listened, but he did not turn himself into a spokesman. He had never wanted a movement. He had wanted one person to stop pretending her preference was a rule. Laura handled the records the same way she had handled the crisis. Calmly, completely, and in order. She saved the camera clips, scanned the meeting notes, labeled the management company emails, added the police incident number, and placed the board vote summary at the front of the binder. When the official minutes arrived, they confirmed that no violation had been established against Ryan's pickup, no vehicle removal had been authorized, and no association officer could contact vendors, issue violation notices, or begin enforcement action without management review and written board procedure. The management company also circulated a new vehicle complaint policy requiring a specific covenant citation, dated photographs, homeowner response time, management review, and board approval before any outside vendor could be contacted. Laura read the policy at the kitchen table and said that rules were finally being used as guardrails instead of costumes. Marilyn tried to call the decision a misunderstanding at the next monthly meeting. She said leadership sometimes required difficult judgment, and she insisted she had only wanted to protect property values. But the room no longer followed her tone. Thomas Reed asked why the management company had been bypassed. Denise Carver asked why unknown individuals had appeared at a private driveway before any valid authorization existed. The management representative asked why language from Marilyn's notices seemed to match the strange recovery email. Marilyn answered with phrases, but the timeline answered with dates. By the end of that meeting, she resigned as president before the board could consider removing her. She remained a resident, but the authority she had worn like a badge was gone. That night, Ryan and Laura drove home past the clubhouse lights and pulled into their driveway beside the truck that had never moved. Ryan looked at it and laughed softly for the first time all week. Laura carried the binder inside and set it near the kitchen camera monitor. Ryan asked if she thought Marilyn would ever admit she had gone too far. Laura looked out the front window at the quiet driveway and said some people never admit the line exists until the record shows where they crossed it. Ryan smiled because that was the whole story. The truck stayed exactly where it belonged. The only thing removed from Oak Hollow Estates was fake authority.